Happy Monday and welcome back to my guide to Pro Tools. Today we're going to be checking out new tracks, how to create them, how to set them up, how to use a bunch of really great key commands and modifiers to quickly navigate your session when you're creating new tracks. So the first one I've got for you is Command-Shift-N, and that's going to open up your new tracks dialog, which only has a few options. First would be how many tracks you want to create, how many channels you want each track to have, what kind of channel you want, what kind of track you want, whether you want it in samples or ticks, and the name. By pressing tab, you can just switch between the amount and the name. Now, the name is not a super useful function because let's say I want to create 8 drum tracks. 8, and I name this drums, create. Now it's just called drums 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to have to rename all these anyway, so it's not very useful to me to use that when I'm creating multiple tracks. Okay, I would just leave that as audio and just rename it when I'm moving quick. Now, if you want to create a different kind of track, let's say you want to create a stereo audio track. In this dialog, used to be that you would just have to hit create and then Command-Shift-N to create a different kind of track. It's a lot easier now because you can just hit Command-Shift-N and it will give you another row. So let's say I want to create 8 drum tracks, 1 mono bass track, 1 stereo keys track, 1 stereo aux input, which I will name mix bus, and 1 stereo master fader. Okay? That's good. That's what we want. But there's a faster way to navigate that dialog. So let's delete these and go again. By holding down Command and going left or right, we can change the channel width of each track. And by pressing up and down, we can change what kind of track. So again, I want 8 drum tracks. I want 1 bass track. I want 1 stereo for the keys, 1 mix bus, and then 1 stereo master fader. Boom. Super quick. Love using those key commands when setting up new tracks. Okay. Now in this window, again, depending how you've got it set up, you can take a look at a bunch of information, including your ins and outs. IO means ins and outs. Here you can see your ins. Here you can see your outs. It's clearer to see in the mix window, so I usually will do this stuff in the mix window. You can read the input names a lot easier. Okay. Now when you create new tracks, by the kind of track you create, it will start at the top of your input list and just go down in consecutive order. See that? Rack mic, DI, helix left, helix right, mic rack, DI, helix left, helix right, yada, yada, yada. We get here, we're at the 9th input. The next track is stereo. It's a different kind of track, right? Even though it's an input track, even though it's an audio track, it starts back at the top because it's got a different amount of channels that can run through it. Okay. The mix bus has not assigned an input, and all the outputs have been assigned to the main physical output. If you go to outputs, just your first output, that's how your tracks are automatically going to come in when you create new tracks. We can change those one by one if we want, or we can use some modifiers to help us. So we want all of these tracks to be running to the mix bus. So let's go here. If we just click that bus, I've already got the mix bus set up, and I could go one by one, but that's for suckers. So if we hold down Option, we can change all of these outputs at one time to the mix bus. So if I go here, output, bus, mix bus, you can see that all of them are now mix bus. But this is going to be an issue here. If I set the input of this to mix bus, Pro Tools will stop it, but generally it would create a feedback loop, which is not what we want. So I'm going to set these all back to my main output. By holding down Command Shift, we can edit only the selected tracks. So let's select all of our input tracks, all of our audio tracks, Command Shift, and we're going to set the output to bus, mix bus. Now you can see that only my audio tracks are going to the mix bus, and my mix bus is still going to the main outputs. So I'll set my input here to mix bus. Now the audio would be going from these 10 tracks to the mix bus, and that would be going out of the master fader. Now, the master fader is a unique kind of track. A lot of the times when you're doing these big changes to all the tracks in your session or to multiple tracks, Pro Tools will ignore those commands sent to the master fader because it's a specific kind of track. So, for instance, if I wanted to change all these to, another one of my buses, let's say I'm sending everything to the drum bus, you can see that the master fader did not go to the drum bus. So I'm going to just switch this back to how I had it, mix bus. Now the last command, it's really useful, is Command Option Shift. So this can sometimes get you into trouble. Anytime you're setting your IO, you always want to double check it and make sure that you're not double patching anything. But this can be really useful. Let's say I got my 8 drum tracks and I'm bringing them all in by ADAT. I hold down those 3 keys and it will use different tracks consecutively for those channels. So I'm going to select ADAT1 and you can see it's just gone down the list. ADAT1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can set this to go in there and this to go in there. And now I've got everything set up. I've got all my inputs correctly set. I've got all my outputs correctly set, and we're good to go. Now, these modifiers don't just work for your I/O. If we hold down Option, we can mute everything, or we can mute only the tracks we have selected, right? All this different stuff. You can do it with inserts. Assigns Pro Q to all of my tracks except, again, my master fader. Or if I hold down Option Shift, it will do it only to the tracks I have selected. Right? This is such a useful shortcut. These are probably among my most used modifiers, Option and Option Shift. Let's take a look at renaming tracks. Oh, and to deselect, if you just hold down Option and deselect the track, it will deselect everything. Okay, if we want to rename a track, all we have to do is double click on the name and it opens up the name dialog. So we can rename this Kick, but then if we want to go to the next track and we go to OK, that's just going to take a long time to do. If we hit Tab, it will take us to the next box. We'll just toggle back and forth between name and comments. So how do we get to the next track? Let's name this Snare Top. If we hold down Command and use the right to go right and left to go left arrows, we can quickly navigate around our different tracks. So I can then name this Snare Bottom, Tom 1. Done. I've named my tracks really quickly. Okay, it's a really easy way to navigate it. Now for changing colors, we just click on this color bar down here and we can open up the color palette. The same can be done in this window. We just click on the color palette will open. It will stay open until you close it so you can switch between the two windows. Okay, let's say I want to make all my drum tracks red. Again, I can just shift. I don't have to hold any modifiers. I can just click on whatever color I want and it will change it. Now I happen to like that blue for my drums, so let's leave it. But let's say that I had this selected. I've got dark green, and I know that I want all my drums to be that dark green. When I select a track, you can see here in the color palette that it shows me what color it is. So if I highlight all my drum tracks, it shows me some are highlighted this color and some are highlighted this color. And I can make them all that color, or I can make them all that color. In this case, I want it to be that color. This is how I normally have my sessions set up. Those are the colors that I would usually use for drums, bass, and keys. Okay? Super simple way to create tracks, create different kind of tracks at one time, set up your IO, set up your naming, and set up your colors. Hope you like this video. Have a great day, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.